Ever read a scene and felt your own pulse quicken? Not because someone told you to feel afraid, but because you were suddenly inside the character. That experience has a name. It is called interiority, and it is one of the most powerful tools in all of fiction writing. Today, we are going to break down exactly what interiority is, why it matters, and how you can build it on the page. By the end, you will have a reliable structure you can use in your very next scene. Let's start with the foundation. What exactly is interiority? Interiority is the inside of your character made visible on the page. It is how a character physically experiences an event, and how that physical experience triggers emotional and cognitive processing. Thought, instinct, memory, desire, dread, all of it rendered in the very moment the event occurs. Let me be clear about what it is not. It is not a character thinking in neat exposition. It is not the author stepping in to explain how the character feels. It is the character's nervous system and mind at work, shown through the body and the immediate, unfiltered flow of consciousness. Now here is the first key idea. Interiority is not a single technique. It runs along a spectrum, from micro to macro. A skilled writer moves along that spectrum deliberately, matching the depth of interiority to the weight of the moment. Let's walk through the 3 levels. At the micro level, you have a single physical sensation or an involuntary reflex. A breath held. A fist that tightens without the character deciding to tighten it. One word of internal reaction. For example, simply, her stomach dropped. That is it. Small, fast, and physical. Next is the mid-range. Here, you have a physical response, followed by a brief beat of internal processing. The character registers something, and the mind moves, briefly, in real time, before action resumes. For example, her stomach dropped. She knew that voice. 3 years, and she still knew that voice. Notice how the body reacts first, and then the mind catches up. Finally, we reach the macro level. This is a full interior reckoning. The character processes a complex emotional reality across several beats. Memory surfaces, contradictions surface, and the self negotiates. You save this for high-stakes moments and turning points. For example, her stomach dropped. 3 years. She had told herself it was long enough, that whatever she felt had calcified into something manageable. Standing in the doorway with his voice still in her ears, she understood she had been wrong about that. She had been spectacularly, thoroughly wrong. Same trigger, much deeper processing. That is the spectrum in action. Now, understanding the boundaries matters just as much as understanding the technique. So let me tell you what interiority is not. First, it is not reported emotion. Writing, she felt scared, simply tells the reader what to feel. Interiority instead shows the physical and cognitive reality of fear and lets the reader arrive at the feeling on their own. Second, it is not an internal monologue lecture. A character who thinks in complete, articulate paragraphs explaining their own backstory is not experiencing interiority. They are delivering exposition wearing a disguise. Third, it is not omniscient commentary. When the author steps in to tell us what the character means or represents, that is the opposite of interiority. Interiority lives inside the character's skull, not above it. So why does this matter so much? Interiority does 2 essential jobs at the same time. The first job is that it pulls the reader inside the character. When a reader experiences a scene through a character's body and mind, not just through observed action and dialogue, something neurological happens. The reader stops watching the character and starts inhabiting them. They feel what the character feels, not because the author commanded it, but because the physical and emotional details create an involuntary identification. This is the difference between a reader who thinks that character is frightened and a reader whose own pulse quickens. The first reader is observing. The second reader is inside the story. Interiority is the mechanism that makes that second experience possible. Think of it as the proximity principle. The closer a reader gets to the inside of a character, the more they care about what happens to that character. Interiority creates proximity. Proximity creates investment. An investment creates the emotional experience that makes a story memorable. The second job is just as important. Interiority replaces mid-action explanation. This is where many writers lose significant ground. When a scene builds momentum and the reader is inside the action, the instinct to stop and explain breaks that momentum. It is like a hand pressed flat against the chest of a running person. Interiority is the solution. When information arises naturally through a character's physical and emotional response to events, the reader receives that information without the story ever stopping to deliver it. The explanation is no longer an explanation. It becomes part of the experience. Let me show you the difference. Here is a scene without interiority. He walked into the room. She froze. They had been engaged for 2 years before she ended it, and seeing him again brought all of that rushing back. She hadn't spoken to him since the night she returned his ring. Notice how the story stops cold. The author climbs out of the scene just to brief the reader. Now here is the same scene with interiority. He walked into the room. She felt the old contraction in her chest, the one she hadn't felt since the night she'd pressed the ring into his palm and told him she was sorry. 2 years. She'd thought she was done with this. The same information arrives, but the scene never stops moving. That is the power we are after. So, how do you actually build this? Here is the good news. Interiority is constructed, not discovered. It follows a reliable architecture, and once you internalize it, using it becomes second nature. The core architecture moves in one direction, body first, then the mind. Something happens in the world. The body registers it before the mind can interpret it. Then the mind catches up. This gives us the reliable 3-beat structure. Beat 1 is the external event. The door opened. Beat 2 is the body's involuntary response. Her hands went still on the keyboard. Beat 3 is the mind's processing, the memory, emotion, interpretation, or instinct. For example, she didn't have to look up to know who it was. She hadn't let herself think his name in 4 months. And here it was, his particular weight on the floorboards, his particular way of saying nothing. Event, body, mind. Memorize that order, and you have a structure you can rely on every single time. Within that architecture, you have a set of sentence-level tools. These are not rules, they are instruments. A skilled writer knows when to reach for each one. The first tool is physical sensation as an emotional signal. The body knows things before the conscious mind names them. Use involuntary responses, a tightening throat, a sudden cold, a slowing of breath, to signal emotion without declaring it. His mouth went dry. That was the tell. The second tool is interrupted or fragmented thought. Under stress, the mind does not think in complete sentences. It fragments, circles, and short circuits. She had to, no. She needed to think. What had he actually said? The third tool is involuntary memory. A smell, a sound, or a visual detail can collapse time and bring the past into the present without a narrative stop. The smoke smell hit her first, and suddenly, she was 8 years old, standing at the kitchen door while her mother laughed. The fourth tool is conditional or hypothetical processing. Characters project, anticipate, and dread. If she went in, she would have to explain. If she explained, she would have to say his name out loud. She wasn't ready for that. She turned around. And the final tool is subtext through suppression. What a character refuses to let themselves think about is as revealing as what they do think. Rendering a character's deliberate avoidance of a thought is one of the most powerful forms of interiority you can use. So let's bring it all together. Interiority is the physical experience that triggers real-time thought. It lives on a spectrum, from a single reflex to a full emotional reckoning. It pulls your reader inside the character, and it lets context arrive in motion rather than interrupting the scene. And you build it with a simple, dependable order. Event, then body, then mind. The next time you write a scene that matters, do not tell your reader what your character feels. Take them inside. That is where the story truly comes alive.